Hi, and welcome to Hot Takes and Holy Grounds, a podcast by Chalice Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, a progressive Christian church in the East Valley and Gilbert of, in the East Valley of the Phoenix area, but most importantly, Gilbert is where we're located. Today we are joined by a guest with us today, not just Jim and myself, but we have with us today the pastor. You're the minister. Is that the correct term?
We use both.
Okay. The minister and pastor of Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, Reverend Sarah Oglesby-Dunegan. And I'm so very happy that she is joining us for our conversation today, because we have gotten into a little bit of good trouble in the last few months together. Even from a distance, we haven't had much chance to sit down and actually talk about the good trouble we found ourselves in. And so today, before we get going, Jim, can you? I've introduced myself as the pastor of Chalice, but Jim, introduce yourself to anyone who's new to listening today.
Hi, I'm Jim Barton. I am a member of Chalice Christian Church, an elder there. I describe myself as an attorney who works in civil rights and including for employees. And I also describe myself as a sort of an amateur theologian. And so I've enjoyed participating in this podcast for that reason, and I'm really excited to be here with Reverend Sarah.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah, so Reverend Sarah, tell us a little bit about you and your congregation.
Sure. Yeah, I moved to the Valley about 4 years ago in the hot summer from Georgia, where I was serving a congregation for a couple years as an interim. And so now I'm serving Valley Unitarian Universalist, which is a Unitarian Universalist congregation that's about mid-size, right in the middle of Chandler. I actually live in Ahwatukee, but I'm in West Chandler, which is like almost Tempe. I don't know. If you're in the metro, it's one of those weird places that everybody thinks is someplace else. And we've been there about 60 years. I think our congregation turns 61 this year.
Oh, wow.
We've been in a couple of different locations. And that's just a neat congregation. I would say we're a people who really believe in shared ministry. So maybe we're all amateur theologians, Jim. Everybody wants to be engaged in the work of ministry together, and it's a really great group of people.
Awesome. Well, thanks for introducing yourself. I love the UUs. When I was a young child, my parents sent me to a UU preschool at Thomas and Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church, and so that's where I grew up and spent my formative years, was learning how to be a little human at a Unitarian church. And so I just always think fondly about that because it was a great experience for me, and so I'm always thankful to the UUs for what you all do. So thanks for joining us today. So before we get started into our topics, since this is Hot Takes and Holy Grounds, we got to talk about coffee and some of the coffee that we've been enjoying recently. Sometimes we do this podcast in a coffee shop and we're drinking the coffee and we get to say, yeah, I like this coffee shop. It's a good one. But today we're recording from home. And so one of the things that I'll start with my coffee. I have been enjoying some coffee from a machine recently. I've been working at a co-working space for the last few weeks as a part of my rhythm in life, because Chalice doesn't have an office for me to go to, and I get really distracted at home, especially during the day, because it's like, oh, there's a mess that I can pick up, and then I get distracted. But when I go to this co-working space, I'm very focused. I'm doing everything. And so they've got this coffee machine that I can use endlessly, and they've got good Arizona coffee in there from a company called Cartel Coffee, which you can find in airports here in Tucson and in Phoenix. You can get Cartel Coffee, and you can get them in many different stores. And so I've been enjoying my free coffee from the co-working space recently, and it's been making me very happy and focused while I work.
I love that.
Jim, would you share your coffee?
I will tell you, I had a Latino rights group that was working on a partnership with Cartel Coffee for something they were doing. It was there's a kind of a new idea in nonprofit space about private partnerships. Anyway, he sent me an email and said, money from Cartel or something like that. And I said, in light of the current administration, let's not upset the National Security Agency by titling our Latino rights, sending me emails that say money from the cartel. Uh,
Yeah, you got to be careful with that cartel money, I guess.
all right, so this is the coffee we use in my office, and
Good
this
Equal
equal
exchange.
exchange.
yeah,
Equal
and Equal
exchange.
Exchange is it's delicious, and it is fair trade, and so ethical and delicious. And so that's the coffee that I've been drinking recently here in the office.
And what about you, Reverend Sarah? What's your coffee of drink? Your coffee of drink. Your coffee of choice recently, or a coffee shop you enjoy?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Equal Exchange because I went on a side note. I went on a trip with Equal Exchange um, more than 20 years ago to El Salvador or to Guatemala,
Mm.
and learned about fair trade coffee there. So I have a love for that. Today, however, I went to my favorite Awatuki coffee shop called Where You Bean, and I got one of their summer specials, which was called an Indian summer latte. And I can't really even explain all the flavors that were in it, but it was really good.
Nice.
And definitely going back for another one. So uh,
Awesome.
definitely a
How,
favorite place to go.
how you been?
Where you been?
Oh, where you
Where
been?
you been?
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. That sounds like a good drink. I might have to try that one day.
They have really good pastries too. Just saying.
Cool.
Well, let's transition in. Well, yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't just go to a coffee shop and just get coffee. You got to try the pastries. That might be a subsection one day, Jim, for our conversations. Is like, where's your favorite pastry from a coffee shop? That's a good conversation for another day. Um, so let's move into a theological conversation for a minute. At Chalice, over the next few weeks to month and a half, we're going to be just going to town on the parable of the mustard seed, reading it from all three gospels that present the mustard seed story from Jesus, the parable. We're going to hear from other scriptures as well that have to do with birds in the nest, because what the theme of this sermon series is about the birds who come to nest in our branches, and we are the bush that turns into a mighty tree. And I just got really distracted because it started raining so hard outside my window, and here in the desert, that is a beautiful distraction.
Amen.
So, um, the parable of the mustard seed. Jesus tells this parable to his the people that are following him. This is in the week after he has entered into Jerusalem on the donkey on Palm Sunday, what we call Palm Sunday, and is a few days away from his inevitable demise uh, and death on the cross by the people who were in power. So he tells this parable of the mustard seed, talking about how from the smallest seed blossoms this gigantic uh, vegetable plant that eventually turns into a tree. Now, towards the end of the sermon series, Jim and anyone who's listening on the podcast is going to know that that's the part that we're talking about, is that changing from the bush into a tree, whatever that impossibility weird thing is. That's kind of where we're going towards. Um, but who are the birds in our branches who come to nest is the theme. And so, Sarah, what would you say? Like, what's your approach to this parable? Do you have a like a thought when you hear it, or like what's the layer that you peel back on it?
Hmm. You know, I like Amy Jill Levine a lot as one of the theologians of the New Testament, and
She's
I
who I'm
like
using for this sermon series. So great,
see, this is why we
great,
like each
great, great.
other. We didn't even know we had that in common. Yeah, I love how she points out that, like, we've picked he picks the mustard seed, not like an acorn. We're not talking about a big oak tree or like some big cedar, right? We're talking about a plant that really is mostly bushy for a long time before it ever becomes a tree, and it's kind of a weed, right? It's not even really like a it's a plant that's really resilient, and like and can take over a garden. So like you wouldn't want to plant mustard seed in a garden that you're really wanting other, like it's gonna multiply.
Yeah.
And I love her sense about that, that there's kind of a little joke that Jesus is a little bit joking with us too. Like, and he's also pushing back against, I think, this, I mean, like with the donkey, right? This is like the mustard seed's another version of the donkey. Like,
Mm.
he's not going to come in on a big majestic horse and look like one of Caesar's soldiers. He's going to come in on a donkey, and everyone's still going to be reverent because they know that he represents something different from the world of Caesar, and that sort of thing. And I think the mustard seed's like that, right? Like, yeah, it's going to sneak up on you. It's going to like take over the garden like the squash does.
Yeah.
But eventually it can become this thing that really, and I looked at some pictures today just to like have in my head, and there are some magnificent mustard trees
Yeah.
that really did finally end up with just this immense capacity to hold birds or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I don't know.
I love that layer. Thank you for opening that one for us. Jim, do you have a thought on this parable?
I think what's cool about the parables is they really sort of meet you where you are, and if you and it, there's such simple stories, but they can speak to you and what you need to hear, right? So you talk about who are the birds. I mean, we like sometimes we are the seed or we are the bush and the birds are the other people, but sometimes we're the birds.
Mhm.
And I think about, for me, one of the things I'm sort of working on is sort of putting the struggle in context, because I think that there's a habit for someone, doing the work that I'm doing, where you can feel like, oh, geez, it's on me, man. I got to win this case. I got to win this fight. I got to organize this movement. I. And it's like, no, no, that's actually not right. Like, you do the work, right? Like you walk the walk. I think that's important, and we shouldn't ignore that. And it is important to do the work. But sometimes you got to remember, like, you're a part of something bigger, and
Mhm.
sometimes the struggle is not all on you. And I think that to me, when I hear about the kingdom of heaven is like this, uninvolved parties are benefiting from the kingdom of heaven, right? Like,
Mm.
the birds didn't help the mustard seed grow. The birds didn't plant the mustard seed. Uh, Maybe the birds ate up some of the mustard seed before the other mustard seed grew into thing, right? I mean, maybe the birds are even bad guys in some respect, but they benefit from the kingdom. And so to kind of like realize, so just speaking to me right now, sort of thinking about realizing that a part of the kingdom is just accepting the gift that is the kingdom, right? Like, the struggle is real, the struggle is important, it is super valuable. But sometimes you're just a bird that sits down in this tree that you had nothing to do with. And that's a part of grace too.
Mm. Well, as they say, that'll preach. Well, thanks, y'all. I'm enjoying working through this sermon series and just kind of exploring birds in Scripture in general. That's been a fun thing for me to do, and so we'll hear from the Psalms as well in the next few weeks too. So I'm just thankful for that little just interpretation that you all gave me. So thank you. I will take those into my sermon preps. So thank you very much for giving me that work. But the main reason why we're here today is because Reverend Sarah and I found ourselves in some good trouble in the last few months. Yeah, last few months with a case. And Jim knows a lot more than I do about how this all works out and how to kind of talk about it. Because I was just on a plaintiff because I agree with the court case, and I I'm tired of the way that our country is creating laws, and I think it's deceptive the way that we do it. And so I was happy to be on a case to say we're not doing that here in Arizona. So, Jim, can you kind of give like a quick rundown of the court case?
Yeah, what I would love to do, I'd like to talk about the case the nuts and bolts of the case and sort of what it means and what it ended up coming out. And then I would love it if we'd spend some time talking about what does it mean to be people of faith when there are laws like this being proposed and perhaps enacted. So first off, in Arizona, we have direct democracy in a lot of ways. And one of the vehicles of direct democracy is the legislature can send legislation to the citizens to vote on. And those are called legislative referenda. And the other version of referenda is when the citizens refer a piece of legislation that the legislature has passed. And so they're kind of opposite. If the citizens don't like something that the legislature has done, they can refer it to the voters. Some of you may remember that happened with vouchers some time ago, and it was successfully blocked. But these referenda that we're mostly looking at this year are the opposite. It's where the legislature doesn't pass the law, but they refer it to the voters. That's because Katie Hobbs is our governor, and she's been vetoing the kinds of laws that the legislature has been passing. So if they want to pass some of these things, they have to do an end run around Katie Hobbs, and the way they do it is by referring it to the voters. So the measure that we're looking at, that we're talking about today, was called HCR 2003, and it now has a proposition number, but I don't know what it is.
318.
318. All right, so Proposition 318 does two things. One, it says both private and public athletic associations and schools and any kind of organization that has an athletic event, if you have female and male events, like you split your groups into two, you cannot let trans girls play in the girls' sports or trans women play in the women's sports. So literally using the power of the state to interfere with public and private as well. I think that's important to remember. Private organizations, how they operate their sports leagues. So there are no small government people behind this, right? This is about as intrusive big government as you could get, literally in your private business, okay? So that's one thing it does. And then the other thing it does is it says if you are any of those groups and you have changing rooms, showers, bathrooms, people can only use those bathrooms and locker rooms and changing rooms if they were for the gender they were assigned at birth. So in other words, it makes a law that says if you are a trans girl, you have to shower with cisgender boys. And if you are a trans boy, you have to change clothes with cisgender girls. It's disgusting, right? So we would like to challenge it because it's gross and evil, and how dare anyone refer such a monstrous act to the voters. But that's not a cause of action. And so what we did instead, at least at this stage, is we challenged it on the basis of it violating the rule that says you can only put one subject at a time before the voters. So if you put a law in front of the voters, the law has to be topically related, like all the topics have to be the same, and then it has to be interrelated. The provisions of the law have to be connected to each other, so they can't be separate chunks of law. And actually, that second one is only for the Constitution. This was a statutory. So really, it just has to be a related subject. So what we said was these two subjects are not related. Who plays on sports teams and who goes to the bathroom in the same place? Those two things are not related. They're totally different. And I try to make an argument to say, well, if this was some big omnibus bill, then maybe you could say it all related to the same topic. But it's not. It's very specific, different changes. And we lost. I think, there's another question for election lawyers. Just for those who are interested, I don't know if the judge is wrong based on the way Arizona election law has played out on the single subject rule. okay, this is kind of like getting Al Capone for tax evasion, right? Like we're not.
Right.
It's sort of an oblique attack on a really evil piece of legislation. So I don't know. That's another podcast about Arizona election law. I
Right.
want to focus on a piece, though, for our purposes, talking about what's right and just.
That's
So
right.
the judge, in ruling against us, said the following. The judge said both provisions, both being the about access to bathrooms and private spaces, and then access to sports teams. Both provisions limit the freedom of transgender students to participate in athletics, whether it be on a girls' team or using an athletic facility that is a locker room. The fact that one provision is broader than the other does not mean that they are unrelated. Um, so that's a very important holding by that judge. So that judge has said, the judge who said this law should go to the voters and the voters should have a chance to vote on it, that the core point of this law is to limit the freedom of transgender children and athletes. That's what that judge said. So why would Arizona make a law whose core point was to limit the freedom of transgender students? Right? That's what we're going to fight about over the next few months between now and November. Um, and so, again, the holding in the particular case, whatever. But for me, as a religious person, as a follower of Christ, the idea that my government would be used to limit the freedom of transgender students is really horrific to me. And I would hope that my fellow Arizonans would read something like that and say, geez, that's not what we're about. That's not who we are. We don't pass laws to limit the freedom of somebody just because they're transgender. And that's literally what this law does, and that's what the court that affirmed it being on the ballot said. So for me, that's where we are with it as far as the law, interesting or not. But I am very interested to know, how do we feel as faithful people when faced with such a horrible outcome?
That's a big question.
Mhm.
How do we continue? How do we move forward as people of faith when horrible outcomes come? I mean, that's the one of the endless questions. A version of the endless question of why do good things or why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah,
And that's the question that we have to answer every single day of our lives when evil continues to reign, even though um, we claim a faith of a loving God, and yet people say, well, if you have a loving God, then why do these bad things happen? Well,
well, and I'm talking about, I guess, a smaller question of like, the people who hit Anne Frank broke the law. Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
People who held her were following the law. And, what do we do as Christians when we have a law, a law that is so fundamentally evil? You know, it doesn't seem
Yeah,
like we should
well,
follow it, but I don't know. I don't know about if that's a thing we're allowed to say.
yeah. I mean, one of the things I think that we do as people of faith is we're voice for the voiceless. We use our positions of power and privilege as people of faith to to be voices for the voiceless. For when trans people are already sticking their necks out enough just by living their lives,
Yeah.
and so like I'm not trying to toot our own horn because we lost a case, but we don't we voiced our opinion on this because this is our faith calling us to do that. Well, at least that's what my faith calls me to do, is to do that. I don't want to speak for you, Sarah. That's your that's your faith to speak on. But I'm compelled by my faith to do the work that I do. I'm compelled by my faith to be a progressive Christian. I am compelled by my faith to vote the way that I do. I am compelled by my faith to love my neighbor the way that I do. And I think that the more that we start stepping in and saying, like, even the more just middle left Christians, people of faith, just start just voicing that my faith compels me to love. My faith compels me to go in this direction. and say that's my faith compelling me to do it. I think that's what we're missing on the left, is that we don't talk about how what what that initial movement is. And so I think as people of faith, we have to name that we are people of faith, and that we have to share that we are people who attend church on a weekly basis, and know we're not awful people. We just seek ways of loving our neighbors more deeply every single week, and we do that through our common worship. And so that's one thing that I think we can do. What you got, Sarah?
One of the core values that Unitarian Universalists are really proclaiming in the last couple years is pluralism. And, I said the other day in my sermon that pluralism centered by love. So, pluralism without love is tolerance. And most of us don't feel that good when we're being tolerated, right? But
Yeah.
pluralism with love is acceptance, and even like deep relationship, right? It's a noticing that we have differences and making room for them. And I think one of the things that is most upsetting to me about the way that the folks who created this referendum were thinking is that they took a very tiny group of people who were already not don't have power because they're kids and then it's a really tiny percentage of children in our lives, and tried to make their life harder and because they're different, because they're different in ways that somebody doesn't understand or doesn't like. And I just think if we're going to have a democracy and we're going to learn how to live with differences and diversity, we've got to come up with solutions that don't make people wrong for being people, right? That don't make us wrong for having our differences. And there are solutions. I see solutions every day in our churches and places of business all over the world, in fact, that take this problem of people having different gender identities and like change the environment so that people's different gender ideas they can be protected. And to me, what makes me more than a little bit angry about it is that they made it be about the kids instead of
Yeah.
making it be about
Yep.
how we've structured our bathrooms or our locker rooms, right? Which are like right now on my campus, we're actually looking at making some structural changes to our bathrooms so that
Mhm.
they're completely non-gendered. There's a bunch of reasons. We're also doing some changes to make them more accessible for people with disabilities. But like I'm not making the person who's different wrong for being different. Oh, you don't fit the infrastructure of my house or my building. I'm saying, oh, my building doesn't meet the needs of this other human being. And I care about the diversity and differences of other human beings because they're human, and the human part's more important than the difference part. So I mean, I think for me, it's a little bit about what did they center there. And I think what they centered was small-mindedness and
Ooh.
small-heartedness, and instead of centering the needs of those who were sort of most at risk. And
Mm.
that's not the world I want to live in,
No,
because I feel like we all been like when I make those changes for the least of us, they actually been I've always experienced this, they actually benefit all of us.
that's right.
So I don't know, Jay, that's a little bit how I come at it, is like that's not the world I want to live in. The
No,
one that you're creating with these kinds of laws is not the world that I, as a person of faith, that I, as a mom, right? Like, I have two kids, one who's almost grown and one who's grown, and it's not the world I want them to live in. It's not the world I want their friends to live in, and we don't have to. We don't have to choose to live in that world. We can make different choices.
that's right. We can. That's the whole point. Yeah, we can make different choices than what we're doing. Like we can. We don't have to go the way that we're going. We don't have to do things the. That's one of the most infuriating things. Like we are choosing the cruelty that we're implementing in the world right now. We are actively choosing to be cruel.
Yeah,
You
and
It's not
like,
know,
like it's not like we're cruel, but like we're like, oh, I accidentally stepped on an ant today. I don't care that I stepped on that ant. It was meaningless to me. Oh, but whatever. I moved on with my life. No, we are actively looking for ant farms to step on. You know, I think that that's a very different way to approach things. And so I think that we have to start choosing to be kind. We have to start choosing to be loving. We have to start choosing to rejecting uh, bigotry and vitriol towards anybody in this world, but especially towards kids. And when you start picking on kids, uh, that's kind of a problem.
I think the other thing that bugs me is the way in which it's being used to distract us from other things that are happening that impact a larger number of people, distracting us from talking about the economic problems that we're facing. It's like if we can, it's like they want to scapegoat a group in order to distract us from how we're actually all being impacted by some larger forces in our communities. And I feel like there's also this little thing where it's like, oh, if I can take the rights of these transgender children, can I take the rights of transgender adults? Can I take the rights of women? Can I take back the rights of LGBTQ folks? And to me, I can already see the lineup of who
Mhm.
else is going to be next. And
Yeah,
so, I mean, anybody who thinks we're just talking about the rights of transgender children is not paying attention to the trajectory, I think, that's behind this. That is also designed for us to not notice, hey, housing's really expensive. Hey, gas is expensive.
mhm.
Oh, hey, we don't actually have access to all the things we need. We don't have access to health care. Those things are impacting the majority of us, and we should be fighting about those things and making laws about those things, not making laws to like diminish the lives of transgender children. Oh.
I think the church has a special role here because I think the sort of secular response is it's this sort of pluralism. I like what you're saying about pluralism with or without love is important because, you know, one thing is who cares? Like, leave these people alone. They didn't hurt you. Well, that's a fine argument. Who cares? Leave these people alone. They didn't hurt you. That's a fine argument. But I think the church says something else. I think the church says, look, these people were made by God.
Yes.
These people are a creation of God, just as they were made. How dare you defile what was made by God? How dare you, in your stupid Arizona legislature, where do you get the nerve to pass a piece of legislation that defiles the work of God Almighty? What hubris must you be exercising? And that is sinful to an amazing degree.
Yeah.
And I think that we have
That's the Saint Peter vision. The unrolling of in Acts, the unrolling of
that's exactly right.
the
The
curtain, and there's
kill and eat, right?
kill and
Yeah,
eat. How dare you
and
say what I
right.
made is unclean? How dare
I
you,
think that's a
Peter?
spin
How
that we
dare
as
you,
church
Peter?
need to put on it because I think it is really. And I will tell you, if you were I was at one of the hearings where they were talking about how they summarized this, and the smirk on some of these faces about this, like as if transgender was some word that they'd never heard of, and cisgender were words that they'd never heard of, and just the disgusting sort of dismissiveness. It is infuriating. And, it is particularly infuriating when you think about your, uh, your friends who are transgender and are being attacked by their government. And it's so profoundly evil. And I really hope, you know, it's if you're just reading the numbers, this is going to be a tough one. But I really hope that the people of Arizona will wake up and will say to themselves, wait a minute, is this who we are? Is this the kind of people we are? Or maybe it is who we are, but is it who we want to be? Do we want
Yeah.
to keep being people like that? Because frankly, it seems like if you look in history, we kind of are those people sometimes. So let's stop being those people. And so, I mean, that's my hope with this is that I really hope that there's some kind of an awakening, and that maybe this could be some kind of a catalyst around let's say no to this. Um,
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
So, Jim, as the non-clergy in the room, I know that there's different rules now since the new administration has come in, but can you tell what good progressive people of faith should do when they approach this on their ballot, this proposition on their ballot?
Yeah, first off, of course, churches can talk about ballot measures. That's lobbying. You can't.
Oh,
Churches can lobby. It should not be a significant part of your activities. It has to be a non-significant part of your activity. But churches can lobby, that's fine. Also, if Jesus Christ calls you to say something, you should say it no matter what Rome tells you, right?
Bingo, bango.
But as it happens now, it's good enough. So, yeah, Christians need to vote no on this Proposition 318. Frankly, you can vote no on all the 300s because they're all garbage. But this one is particularly evil, and I think as Christians, we would be particularly compelled to vote against it. I mean, there's others that are also bad, but they're more bad because they're bad for democracy and they're bad for other things. This is really bad for humanity, and I think you should vote against it. You should tell your friends and families to vote against it. And you should tell your church, you should say, we need to oppose this because these are children of God who have been attacked by a piece of legislation, and we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. I agree.
Well, thank you all so very much for being a part of our conversation today. Thanks to all who have listened and made it through this conversation today. We're glad that you joined us. And Reverend Sarah, thank you so very much for being our friend today and for talking theology, coffee, and politics with us, all in about 30 minutes. That's not a bad conversation for a Monday
And hey,
evening.
I don't want it to go without being said. I really appreciate both of you putting your names on it, like literally going on record to stand up for trans kids and to put it out there and to literally, it's in the record books now that you have, as they say, you have the receipts. And I think that means a hell of a lot to some people to see those reverends in that plaintiff's box. And I really appreciate it. And I guarantee the folks who are being victimized here also appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Jay, thank you for being the other person on it with me. I was really glad not to have my name be alone.
Yeah. And Sarah, do you mind sharing your ad, like where people can find you if they want to go to a service, a worship service on a Sunday morning?
Yeah, we're at 6400 Del Rio in Chandler, Arizona, just in West Chandler, right close to the I-10 and Ray Street.
Awesome. What time do y'all gather?
We gather at 10:30, and we're also online on YouTube, so you can stay at home and watch, or you can come show up and hang out with us. We hang out for about an hour and 15 minutes. We've got stuff for kids, stuff for adults. Sometimes we all hang out together, kids and adults. And
those are the good
soon
days.
enough, you will see that our bathrooms will be non-gendered. So
I'll come check those out. I'll be excited to see them.
My bathroom at home has always been non-gendered, by the way.
Ours are separated by generations, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, maybe that's the appropriate way to divide bathrooms is by age. All right, y'all. Well, thank you again, and thanks for joining us on Hot Takes and Holy Grounds. Y'all be well.
Thank you.
Good night.